Hello, welcome back to Who Are You, the free 5-part video series that will guide you through the process of dreaming, mapping, and taking action on your goals so that you can live the life of your dreams. Today, we're going to talk about another common mistake that keeps people from achieving your goals. And if you're making this mistake, you might be someone that goes through cycles of goal setting. Maybe you set goals, you're super motivated, you buy all the organizers, the planners, the protein shakes, whatever it is, and then it becomes impossible. You might feel overwhelmed and stressed at this goal that's just looming over you, and you might not know where to start or what actual steps to take to get there. So today we're going to be answering some of those questions, and by the end of this series, you will have a full blueprint to take action and achieve your dreams. I hope you're ready. Let's jump on in. So before we jump into today's mistake, I want to tell you a little bit about who I am. If you want the full introduction, make sure you watch part 1. Hopefully you've already watched it at this point. But my name is Rhea Davis. I am a holistic goal setting and happiness coach, and I'm super passionate about helping people achieve their dreams through holistic goal setting. So I use this framework that it's 5 parts, which is why we have a 5-part video series. The first step is discover your dreams. And in part 1, we took a look at where you wanted to go, what you wanted to do, and hopefully you really took some time to reflect and think about what you truly want, not what people want for you, not what what society says that you should want, but what you truly want. So we looked at that in part 1, and in part 2 today, we are going to survey the environment. We're going to take a look at where we're at and how we're going to connect the two. So we'll kind of continue that process throughout the series. But make sure, if you haven't already, to follow along wherever you're watching this or hearing this, either on the podcast or YouTube or Instagram. I'll link everything below. But I want to make sure that you have that free PDF so you can follow along with this training, and that'll all be linked in the notes wherever you're watching this. So I want to talk about building a house for a second, because first you have to figure out what you want. And again, we did this in part 1, discovering your dreams. Maybe you thought about this big, beautiful house that you wanted. Well, before you can start work on building the house, you've got to survey the environment, right? You've got to look at, okay, is it rocky terrain? Do I have enough room for what I want to build? Do I have to clear trees? Will we have to add anything? Will we have to add an extra layer of soil? What supplies will we need? It just helps us figure out what we need to do. Again, what supplies we'll need, the budget for the builders, etc. It helps us figure out what we need to do. So I want to tell you a quick little story to help really drive home the point of today's workshop of part 2. We love to travel and have fun and all that kind of stuff. And this is a picture of my son and I in Disney World. And you can tell that we're looking a little rough. So we were going to meet my parents at the resort, and we were trying to find where we needed to go. Had our luggage. It was just me and my 2 kids. My husband had to work, so he stayed home. But my kids and I, we had just gotten done driving, which was like a 5-hour drive. You know, we had our luggage. The kids are ready to get out and play and see their grandparents, and we're trying to find the room. So we go, of course, to the map, and it has the directions, and it should have that little sticker that says you are here, but unfortunately this one didn't. So we're wandering around. It starts pouring down rain. My cell phone is dead. My kids are excited. We've got all our stuff. We wander around for over an hour and finally come across the building. And it was actually right in front of us the whole time. We just kept passing by it. But we didn't know where we were really starting. We just were somewhere. So we had no way of knowing how to get where we were going. If we knew where we were at, we could have gotten to that building on the map. But because we couldn't identify that, we ended up, like you see in this picture, just soaking wet. But we were still happy. We still had fun. So that brings me to mistake number 2. Not knowing where you're at, not honestly evaluating your starting point. Everyone's got to start somewhere. And without any idea of where you're at, you have no way of getting where you're going. Keep in mind, though, that your current location doesn't have to be the destination, and it's not if you dream and you set goals and you go after them. But it does help to remember that every choice that you've made up until this point has led you to where you're at. And a lot of people, that might feel bad, like, oh, why did I do that? And that's where forgiving yourself comes in. But on that same note, you also have the choice today to get you to where you want to be tomorrow. So every choice that you've made up until this point led you to where you are now. And that means that the choice that you make from here on out leads you to your future. And you get to decide what that is. And that's a great thing. And that's the wonderful thing about life. In part one, I talked about how life is just a game. And when you treat it that way and you see it as happening for you, you can avoid a lot of these mistakes when it comes to goal setting. All right, so let's get into the nitty-gritty of it. Where are you now? Here's the thing. You might have some limiting beliefs that might be driving this mistake. And a limiting belief is something that you see as a truth, but it's really not. So a good example of a limiting belief would be that, maybe if I come from poverty, then that just means that I will always be in poverty. And we know that that's not the case. So some limiting beliefs that might be driving this mistake, if I ignore it, it'll go away, which I don't think any of us in our heart of hearts think that's actually a truth. So it's more really a lie that we like to tell ourselves when we don't want to deal with something. It's not really even a limiting belief. But I wanted to point it out because it kind of is along those same lines. It's something that's holding you back. Also, I don't want to think about it. Again, that's a pretty active choice, but it's an active choice to not focus on the negative. And I can understand why you would want to do that because, everybody wants to be happy and positive all the time. But it's only negative if you label it that way. So you're ignoring something that really is neutral. If you have a problem and ignore it, that's not helping anything. Even if you're focusing on the positive, that's not helping anything. So even though you don't want to think about it, the biggest key here is forgiving yourself and understanding, again, that everything is happening for you, not to you. So nothing's really good or bad. It's all just a judgment that you place on it. And it can all be good when you're learning lessons. Another limiting belief that I think is probably one of the biggest ones, and this is really more down to the belief, is that the way it is has to be the way it always will be. And I go back to my example of poverty earlier, but really this is where the real deeper issues lie. The way that it was for your parents is the way it'll always be for you. I'm just a girl. I'm just, whatever. I can't think of a good example, but I'm just fill in the blank, and that's all I'll ever be. Oh, I'm just whatever negative label you want to put on yourself. That's that negative self-talk. I'm just fat and that's all I'll ever be. I'm just lazy and that's all I'll ever be. Those aren't nice things to say to yourself. And I think that's why I had a hard time coming up with them, because I really am actively every day making sure that I'm talking to myself in a loving way, because no one else can love me more than I love me. So I want you guys to keep that in the back of your head as you're going through this, because part 2 is kind of heavy. It's addressing where you're at. And if you're in this training, you've got goals, you've got dreams, you've got places that you want to go. It's hard to stop and sit in the moment. And being present is a big part of this whole process. So being present, being mindful, not placing judgments on things, that's how you're going to achieve your goals. And that's why holistic goal setting is so much different than traditional goal setting, because we're focused on the deeper issues. So some other limiting beliefs: I'm too old. Well, my great-grandmother, I believe, graduated from college at like 92 years old. I don't remember the specifics, but I mean, you can do it. You're never too old. I'm too young. That's another one I hear. A lot of times people think, oh, well, I'm just 19, I'm just 20. you're always going to feel that way. If you are under 25 and you're watching this or you're listening to this, it does not change. I will be 30 this year, and I still don't fully know everything there is to know about life. You're never going to be too young to start something, and you're never going to be too old to start something. Time is the only limited resource that we have, and so it just is what it is. It's not good or bad. You're not too old or too young. None of that is relevant when you're focused on what you can control. You can't control your age. You can't control time. You can't control those types of things, but you can control your reaction to it, and that's what we're doing. And we're taking these limiting beliefs out of the whole equation. All right, last example, I don't know enough. That kind of could go with, I'm too young, or maybe you are someone who has pursued a career. You went through, college and you maybe medical school or whatever, and then you realize that's not the career that you want. Well, you're at a point where you're like, oh, I know all this, but I don't know enough about another subject to switch careers, or it's too late, I've already chosen this, or what about all the time that's already passed? And I want to make a note about time spent, because I feel like a lot of us will stay in situations that aren't good for us because of the time that we've already invested into it. And I mean, the feeling of wasting time is never fun, but you're not wasting time. You're learning lessons through that time. It's not like that time just went away. And also, the more you continue, would you rather waste 3 years instead of 10 years? Think about it that way. So don't put too much weight into something like things that you've already invested in, because you can always change your mind. You can always do something different. So all of the judgments that I just talked about where you're at now, they're keeping you from honestly evaluating your life. When you place judgments of good or bad or right or wrong on your past, inherently it's judging yourself, because that's what those are. They're not solid truths. They're opinions, and they are subjective. And you're keeping yourself from healing by shaming yourself. And you're staying in a victim mindset when you do that. When you think about your past and even your present, because we're evaluating where we're at now, if you see that as defining who you are and where you'll go, you won't get very far, because what got you here won't get you there. So you can't let that take you into your future. You have to decide how you're going to move forward. Hopefully that makes sense. Maybe this will help a little bit more. One of my absolute favorite quotes: today is the tomorrow you were dreaming of yesterday. This has been my favorite for I don't know how long. I think I heard it in middle school or high school, and I am unsure who to attribute this to. But think about it. Today is the tomorrow that you were dreaming of yesterday. At some point in your life, the past was the present. So the present today is tomorrow's past, which means that today gets to fuel tomorrow. Just like the decisions that you made yesterday brought you here, the decisions you make today will get you there. Was this the tomorrow that you were dreaming of? Are you in the tomorrow that you dreamt of yesterday? If not, let's keep going. Let's get you there. Another thing I want you to keep in mind, and I mentioned this earlier, is that your current location is not the destination. People who have overcome adversity, think about that. Their current location didn't end up being their destination. Or you could even flip that the other way and look at it from the opposite angle. People who were given everything in life and they didn't succeed, even though they had an amazing upbringing. This is not a truth. This is a limiting belief that who you are, or, where you came from has to define where you're going to go. That's absolutely not the truth. If it was, no one would get anywhere. They'd all stay the same and the life would just continue on. So you have the choice to change that. All right, so let's take a look at what the actual issue is, right? I said, what got you here won't get you there. And without an honest evaluation of your life, I'm sorry, this might sound blunt, but goal setting is a waste of time. Unless you're willing to truly, honestly, and just openly evaluate your life right now without judgment, then the rest of this training's a waste of time. You have to know where you are to be able to get where you want to go. And I want you to also reflect on what got you where you are now. A lot of people think that their environment is what creates them and their beliefs and everything. So let me give you the example of, let's say you live in an environment that you're not thriving in. It's a toxic environment in whatever way you imagine that. So you're in a toxic environment. You're saying, I'm not happy because of my environment. However, your environment is actually a reflection of what's on the inside. So if you want to change your environment, you have to change your behavior. And your behavior is directly influenced by your beliefs. So it's important to really look at what you value and what you believe, because that creates parameters for your life. And I talked a little bit about that in part 1, and we'll continue to talk about that more. But again, it's not your environment that makes you happy or sad or whatever. It's your behavior that makes your environment. Hopefully that makes sense. All right, so what we need to do is we need to find the alignment issue. And this is where you will pull out your handy dandy workbook and you'll look at, it's question 3, because in part 1 we did the first 2 questions. So the question says finding the alignment issue. What is different about your life now from the life that you described in part 1? What areas of your life are out of alignment with the vision that you created? So I want you to really do some comparing and contrasting and be honest with yourself without judgment, without the right or wrong, the good or bad. Put all of that to the side and truly think about where you want to go, where you're at, and where the difference is. And I'll see you back for part 3.